So if you saw the crusty 1406 video a couple weeks ago, you know this carburetor's dead and it's got no life left in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mill this thing down, take a look, see what the main metering circuits look like, and see what it looks like on the inside. Let's take a look. So one thing I've always wanted to do with an Edelbrock carburetor is cut it apart and actually physically see what the metering circuits, what the vacuum ports, and everything looks like on the inside. And really the best place to start with this is up front with the main metering circuit and the vacuum ports that feed the ported and timed vacuum in it. And I think we'll get a good indication of what's going on here when we start removing some layers of material here and see actually how it's routed within there and how big they are and you know, just all the bits and pieces of it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this thing looks once we start cutting some material away. And the first thing we have to do is disassemble it. So before we get started on the mill, we need to start knocking some stuff off of here. So the boosters are going to come out. The nipples that are on the front of it for the vacuum ports need to come out of there. They're steel. And for what I use for a mill, which isn't very high tech, when you change materials and you go from aluminum to steel and you change the hardness of it, it does tend to jump around a little bit. So removing those out of there will make it a lot easier. Also, too, with this is removing the throttle shafts. I think I'm just going to remove the primary for right now. They are a bit of a pain to get out of there. They weren't really meant to go in and out. That's why the screws that are in there are a one-way screw. Once you try to back them out of there, you're not going to be able to put it back in there without doing some modification to it to get it to work. But you know, the main goal here is I really want to see how things are routed on the front of the carburetor. And I've got some ideas on some things that I want to do with, especially the accelerator pump side. I've always thought that putting a bigger shot of fuel in there would be beneficial to some situations, but I haven't been confident enough to modify it because I don't know what it would affect on the inside of it. So by tearing this apart and really starting to cut the layers down and see how that's in there, I think I'll get a better idea of it. Now, the other side of that, too, is there are these little aluminum plugs that Edelbrock puts in there because when they do the machining process on the main body here, that is where they access to do the final drilling, modification, sizing of those ports, depending on what they are. And we'll start to knock some of these plugs out of here. Now, some of these we're going to have to drill out, and some will pop out, I think, a little bit easier once we start to mill it down. But the whole key here is to see which one of these I can remove in the future and how I can best adjust this carburetor if I need to be on any of those circuits, especially the accelerator pump side. And I guess lastly, anytime you have something apart and you can kind of see how it works, I think in my case anyway, it lets you be a better builder, it lets you be a better tinkerer, it lets you be a better tuner when you understand physically how all the things go together. I am quite certain that the first guy to ever tune a carburetor knew what was on the inside, knew what some of the things that he or she needed to do to adjust and change and tweak and how they would affect the other things. So it's just my knowledge really is you know what I'm really after here. And you know, will it help me be a better tuner? I don't know. Will it give me some ideas of some things that I can modify within the main body of this thing? Maybe. Are there some things that I know I'm not going to be able to get to? Probably, but that's okay, and knowing all those things is a good thing. And here's a shot of an Edelbrock carburetor at the Sanford facility. That the main body goes down onto a fixture, and then the probes come in and do the final little cutting of all the passages that are on there, and then the little aluminum plugs go in there. You know, it's kind of interesting, you know, looking at all that. Everybody says, well, carburetors are old and analog and unsophisticated. Well, they really are. There's a lot going on there. And, you know, all the situations that we ask a carburetor to perform in, they have to do it, and they have to do it very well. They have to idle. They have to go from idle to open throttle. They have to go to idle to part throttle. And there's got to be shots of fuel for that. And the main metering circuit has to circuit that fuel properly, and if it doesn't, well, then it doesn't operate correctly. So all those little things have to be taken into consideration when you're designing and building a new carburetor. And certainly the Edelbrock's been around for quite a long time. It does it very well, but understanding all these pieces of the puzzle, to me, kind of brings the whole thing together. I've had my hands on this carburetor for 30 some years now. I know it inside and out, but now I'm really going to know it on the inside, and that's what we're going to take a look at here. So once we get done disassembling it all, taking all the pieces apart, then it's time to get over to the mill and start taking some layers off. Now, the whole idea of this is to take off as little material as possible, slowly but surely. That way we can kind of start taking these layers off of the material here, so we can get down into where the main metering circuits are, to where those vacuum ports are going and how they look coming from the different places within the carburetor, and see how they're routed underneath here. So we're going to take it slow. It is a very time consuming, but it's worth it in the end, because you can kind of start seeing how they are layer by layer. And every time we get to something cool, we'll stop, we'll take a look at it, and get some good pictures of it. Because for me, again, I'm trying to understand how this all works out, and later on I want to be able to go back and go, yeah, I understand how that accelerator pump goes all the way up from the lower part of the carburetor up into the top part, and how fuel pushes through there, and what are the barriers to that, and where can I make it better, or can I make it better? So we'll take this nice and slow, and we'll start knocking some material off. Now, one of the first things that we start to uncover here is the ports on the front of the carburetor. You got the PCV port in the center. On the driver's side of the carburetor is the manifold vacuum port, and on the passenger side is a timed vacuum port. So we can kind of see a little bit of how those are run through the body here, and start to see how big those ports are. The PCV port isn't near as big as I thought it was, but it's still very vital, very critical. And the vacuum port, or the manifold vacuum port, is a little bigger than I thought it was going to be. So again, these are all little details of things that I wouldn't have ever known had I not start to cut this thing apart. So it's kind of cool to start to see the layers come off here and see what is hidden underneath here. So we'll keep milling down here and see how far we can how far we can get down, and what else we can reveal here. And one of the first really cool things we uncovered here was the accelerator pump passage and how it routes from the bottom well of the accelerator pump up to the port that drives it through the squirter in the center of the carburetor. Now, this was something that I was really interested in seeing because, one, I wanted to see how big it was. If I drill it out, how much bigger can I make it? And will I get into other areas of the carburetor, other passages of the carburetor? So knocking it down to this layer right here was super critical for me. And I really was excited to see how this works out. Now, in the end of the carburetor, there is an aluminum plug, so I can knock that out and re-plug it. And I think with the correct drill and the correct length, I can get it from the side of the carburetor, open up that passage a little bit more, and I think I can get it from the top side going down and open it up there as well and have just a little, well, it's like a 45-degree intersection right there. But I think this could be one of those areas where with a little bit of time, a little bit of, maybe some destroying a carburetor or two here and there, I think I may be able to find some really cool areas here. So we'll give it a whirl here, but this was one of the areas that I was really interested in seeing, and it showed up, fairly deep down in the cut here. Now, once I got down far enough on the accelerator pump side, the port there that goes over into the well for the accelerator pump also goes straight out to the carburetor, because that is one of the things on that fixture that gets drilled. So I took a little punch and knocked it out from the inside out. But that way I get a better idea what that plug looks like that's undamaged, and see if I can replicate that, create that. I don't think I can buy it off the shelf somewhere, but I can create one. That way when I do go in and start to modify an accelerator pump passage, I can knock that port or the plug right back into it. But anyway, very cool piece to that puzzle here that I never knew about. Now, this is one of those interesting things here where the main metering passage goes from the top of the carburetor down into the little well that pushes it out into the venturi. Now, again, this was one of those things where I was kind of interested in seeing because, I'd never physically obviously seen one before, and they were a little smaller than I anticipated. Those little slots where the fuel kind of comes out, obviously they're very calibrated, very precise. And, seeing those from the other side, from the inside of the carburetor, instead of from the inside of the venturi is kind of interesting. Also, too, the vacuum port that runs over to the electric choke, very interesting to see that, just to see how it's routed. It's not that complicated. It's not that difficult. But again, it's just seeing is understanding, and understanding is getting a little bit better, smarts about what's going on here. So again, just every step here just finds more and more cool stuff. Now, this one's kind of interesting because it'll show us some passages, again, that we can see from now the inside of the carburetor. The transfer slot is half. Half of that slot is below the throttle blade, and the other half is above the throttle blade. It's what gives the carburetor that ability to get off idle and start delivering more fuel. The little hole beneath that, closer to the bottom of the carburetor, is where the idle mixture screws go. And again, that is below the throttle blade. So as you adjust that mixture screw, what you're doing is restricting that port that is feeding into the venturi of the carburetor and giving you the idle mixture, the fuel that you need to get down in there. So again, very critical little pieces to the puzzle here on how fuel transfers. And I've always thought about opening that slot up a little bit, but now I'm not quite sure. And I think if I did, it'd be a little complicated because you're going to push material back up into the carburetor. So I'm going to have to think about that one for a little bit more. Well, we've really reached a point here where we've gotten down as far as we can, because if I go any deeper, I'm going to get into the venturi, and there's really no point in that. We've opened up those circuits as much as I wanted to see them. I've gotten a really good look at the main metering circuits and how big they are, what that transfer slot looks like, what's that idle mixture screw slot looks like. And, really the most important one for me, I think, is the accelerator pump passage. And I think what I'll be able to do is open that up a little bit more coming in from the side to drill it open. And then I think what I'll also be able to do is to modify the squirter and give it a little bit more oomph. The problem is calibrating it and understanding how much fuel is going to go through there, and that's what I'm struggling with. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on orifice size and how much bigger I can open that up without, one, affecting the performance of it, weakening the structure, or weakening the metal that comes out of the aluminum bodied squirter. So again, I'm blown away here by this. I mean, I guess it's because I've been waiting for so long to do this and finally found an opportunity with a really, really crappy carburetor to get it done. But I'm just, again, I'm the things in my mind now are a little swimming. I know that I can modify the accelerator pump passage and deliver more fuel. I'm a little concerned about, the thoughts that I had on what I wanted to do with the transfer slot, because if you've read anything online, if you've experienced it before, one of the biggest problems that people have is they always say that they have a little dead spot from off idle or low RPM to wide open throttle. And I can tune out 99% of that. It's that 1% that I want. And I think maybe that transfer slot might be the place where I can find that. I don't know. And how much do you open it up? Again, it's all keeping it consistent and calibrating it. And there's different file sizes that I can use that I think would be okay, that I could flush out of there. But, it's a matter of kind of continuing to work on it here. What are the next steps for this carburetor? That I don't know. I may, mill down the backside to see if there's anything on the secondary side we can look at, but I'm going to have to take off a ton of material to do that. I want to get into the jets, so maybe I'll go from the bottom and start milling the bottom down and look at the passages, how the main metering jets flow for the primaries and the secondaries, and maybe there's something to learn out of that as well. Honestly, I don't know. I'm open to anything at this point, but continue to dig into this is going to be fun, because it's going to give me just more understanding of what's going on here. And again, if it helps me be a little bit better on the tuning side and help kind of diagnose some things a little bit better, and maybe find some other solutions for folks that kind of are in that gray area, that really, 650 horsepower to probably 750 or so. It's kind of one of those oddball things. The 800 CFM carburetor does fairly well there, but it could do better. And you run out of jet, you run out of rod that you can use. The step up springs, you only have a certain number of combinations with it as well. And I think I've got some ideas now that I may work on when we get down to the big block for the Chevelle, because it's going to be probably a little bit more aggressive than I want it to be, but, that was the cam I selected and the cylinder heads that are on there. And, if it's a little more aggressive, then fine. But I may end up modifying that 800 to see how it works on there. So anyway, I hope you liked this video. I really, really have been waiting to do this for so long that for me, this one's kind of a personal favorite. And I'm sure I'm going to look back on this footage. I've got probably 30 hours of footage that I cropped down to get to what we're in here today. But man, it's so much fun to knock this thing down at that level and just kind of see where it's at. So anyway, I hope you guys got something out of it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up on that one, or heck, even a thumbs down. I don't really care. YouTube likes it either way. So anyway, I appreciate it. And for sure, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe and notification bell. And cool. We'll catch you guys on the next one. I'm eager to see where I go with this next, and hopefully we can find something cool to do on the next time I start cutting this carburetor down. We'll see you guys on the next one.